Now let's focus on a crime that was committed 3 years ago. On September the 18th, 2020, Lieutenant Colonel Charl Kinnear, a top cop probing gangsters in Cape Town, was gunned down outside his Bishop Lavis home. Immediately after the hit, the police minister promised swift justice for this audacious crime. Suspected gang kingpin Nafiz Modak is currently in custody awaiting trial for Kinnear's murder, along with other suspects. He was arrested in April 2021. But there's more. A police watchdog report was released last year. Now, that apparently raised concerns that rotten cops were also involved in the hit. That report, though, was muzzled, apparently over fears of witness intimidation. It remains muzzled to this day. Parliament's Police Portfolio Committee was then stopped from tabling this report. That happened last year. Well, this week, Charl Kinnear's widow, Nicolette, has opened culpable homicide charges against some implicated officers, and she joins us now. Mrs. Kinnear, thank you so much for chatting to us. You know, we spoke in November last year, and I just remember how incredibly frustrated you were after that Police Portfolio Committee was unable to really get stuck into that report because it was essentially muzzled. It remains muzzled. Am I presuming correctly that the charges you've laid this week against some police officers relate directly to that report, which you have seen?
Good evening, Sally. Yes, indeed. The reason for me having to take the step in having culpable homicide docket registered was for the simple fact that IPA did an investigation. Within the investigation, they found that there were certain things that should have been done and certain things that should not have been done. In terms of, for example, when my husband's phone was pinged, why wasn't that process stopped? And various other officers were implicated. And because of that, to date, we are 3 years down the line. SAPS hasn't had one disciplinary hearing pertaining to any of the officers implicated. Not one criminal charge has been brought against any officer that might have willingly or unwillingly played a part in my husband's death. A lot of those implicated has in actual fact left the organization, be it by means of retirement or by they just resigned. So where did that leave us as a family? As an organization, they no longer could have disciplinary hearings, and we just couldn't leave it like that. I just couldn't leave it like that. So with the culpable homicide docket, whether you are still within the organization or not, based on the investigations, of course, if it's found that in some way or the other, while doing your duty or not doing your duty, you played some or other part or role which could have led to my husband's death, then it meant you could be charged criminally, yes.
I hear you. The report, which remains muzzled to this day, and the official reason I think is fears that witnesses will be intimidated, it was meant to be passed on, or it was passed on to provincial prosecuting authorities and then at national level. Have you spoken to the NPA? What have they said about whether they are going after any potential rotten cops who may be either directly linked in ordering this hit on your husband or, as you say, who may have been negligent in their duties?
Sally, that indeed is another frustration. The whole classification of the IPID report itself. Because, as I've mentioned before, I met with IPID in May last year, 2022. My visit that I received from IPID was shortly after the visit that they had actually drafted and signed off and given the report to the minister. And he was informed, Minister Charl was informed that the next meeting would be with me or with us as a family to inform us about actually what was happening in the report. And whilst in that meeting, I asked how I would be able to acquire a copy of this report. And the answer that I received was it would now be sent through to Parliament, to the Portfolio Committee, And once tabled there, it is seen as a public document, and we as a family would then be able to gain access. Well, as you also know, between then and about, I think it was the first week of June, practically every media house wrote about it, so the report was leaked. But then that is where it sort of gets a twist in the tail, because all of a sudden when I started asking, when will we be able to have a copy, an official copy, and because I'm not going to lie, I received several copies from various media houses. And then as soon as I started asking all the questions, then all of a sudden in August 2022, then the late Tina Juma-Peterson then confirmed to the portfolio committee that she had received instructions from the speaker that indeed the report was classified. So that to me was very weird, because firstly, had the report been classified from day one, why would IPID then come and discuss it with me? How do you classify a document that has been leaked and written about and spoken about all over media? So those were all the questions that I asked. Then back to the portfolio committee, we went in November, and while a lot of questions were asked, and what was very frustrating for me is that since 2020, since my husband's assassination, we seem to be on this roller coaster. We had IPID doing an investigation, and rightfully so, as it is their duty to do. And they came to a conclusion. They had certain recommendations. They implicated certain members. That was basically the dereliction of duty. As the IPID report said, they did not do their job as mandated to them by the Constitution. That was basically IPID's words. And then it was just as though SAPS is not satisfied with this report. Then they went again and established a committee or an investigation team within SAPS.
But now, sorry to jump in here. Yeah, it's so confusing because this is an IPID report. Now, my understanding is that when it comes to the police watchdog, obviously the police cannot investigate themselves. So once there's a report from IPID, it should go to the National Prosecuting Authority. If they decide there's enough to open a case, then they do that. Has the NPA actually given you any feedback?
No, because you see, Sally, where it's also sort of a double-edged sword. The very same IPID that investigates police officers, their boss is Minister Charl. So I'm reporting to my suspect's boss, which I don't know whether just don't understand, but you cannot have that.
And it's a difficult one because at the same time we've got a high-profile suspected kingpin, Nafiz Modak, in court. He's been denied bail, along with Charl Kinnear, who was arrested just days after your husband's murder. He's the guy who was pinging his phone, allegedly, and other people. So the Hawks have done great work in actually really going undercover and bringing all this evidence forward. But what I'm hearing you saying is there's a substantial point missing, which is the role of potential cops. And I'm hearing you correctly that it's not just cops who are negligent, though that could be part of it, but rotten cops as well. Am I right?
Look, in the IPID investigation, obviously, at this stage, it doesn't as much deal with corruption as in terms of what happened. In terms of what happened with the guarding, why was the guarding removed? What happened with the pinging of my husband's telephone?
And just a point of clarity on the guarding, because this is my error earlier. I thought it was just a week or so before he died, but you explained to me in that last interview, it was actually in 2019, in December. You only had it for a month, so there were many months.
Correct.
Was your husband concerned about that lack of guard?
He was, and so was I. I raised the issue publicly in the media in January 2020. And in actual fact, the response to me going to media was my husband getting a letter to say that because prior to him being at the anti-gang unit, he was the commander at Sea Point. And then it was actually said that he needs to go back to Sea Point. And both my husband and I said, to do what? The problem is not where he's working. The problem is what's in his head and what he has uncovered. So I actually posed the question, are they going to brainwash him between the AGU base and Sea Point? Because what he had uncovered, whether you put him wherever, made no difference. And eventually, after many meetings and with the union, my husband and the then General Lincoln actually came to an agreement that he would stay at AGU. But yes, Sally, and then the first time it came in March of 2020, that it came to our attention that his phone was being pinged. And again, on the 5th of September, he was in Johannesburg at the time. He called me to say he actually got a call where they informed him that, his phone is being pinged. So not only did the Hawks know that his phone is being pinged, they also knew by who his phone is being pinged. So my question is, if you know somebody is committing a crime because that is what was being done or is being done by pinging a phone, why wasn't the person arrested? We know that Zayn was arrested after the assassination, but why was nothing done prior?
Yes.
So if I come to the IPID report, obviously those officers that knew about the ping, their names and so forth comes out in there. So my COPE charges, for example, will be against those kind of officers that, in my opinion, were just negligent in performing their duty.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. And as always, our thoughts are with you at this time. It cannot be easy. 3 years on, not an easy time for you. And just saluting your bravery in not giving up on this. Your husband would be proud, I think. And we will continue to give this coverage. Please keep us posted. Thank you so much. That is Charl Kinnear's widow, Nicolette. She has now laid culpable homicide charges against some police officers who she believes, based on a classified IPID report, that were potentially very negligent. And she's just detailed how she and her husband, in the months up to his death, kept flagging publicly and with police authorities that he didn't have security detail, he was not protected, and his phone was being monitored. Those are the questions that she wants answered, that are not being answered. Even while the criminals, the suspected criminals, are in court, she believes there's a big case the police still have to answer.